we go. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Our guest for Wealth Mastery for Women in this April 2023 edition is Vicki Holman. She is joining us to talk about tools to quantify financial freedom. So Vicki, I know you have a wonderful presentation for us, and I will let you share your screen and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I am so excited as I pull this up to share with you some of the tools that I use to help quantify financial freedom. And the first question I want to ask is, what does financial freedom mean to you? This picture is right outside my backyard. This is the beautiful Bryce Canyon. And that's one of my goals, is to be able to travel and visit beautiful places. And so with that, let's get started. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me first, and then I want to talk about your why. Then we're going to jump into the financial metrics and tools, your financial independence number, your net worth, and how to allocate your spending. And then finally, my contact information. So this is me. This is my pride and my joy. This is my family. And everything I have revolves around them. And I also love to travel and adventure. So that is just like what makes me tick. About my business background, this slide will sum it all up. But for a long time, I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was able to start doing bookkeeping from home. And I really enjoyed that, but I enjoyed being home with my kids too. But I've always loved business and numbers. My dad is a serial entrepreneur, and instead of reading bedtime stories, he would show me business plans. He would show me financial statements. I grew up reading blueprints, and I was just amazed at what he was able to do by helping other people, not only through the businesses that he did, but the way he treated people. And I wanted to emulate that. So after I'd been married for about 15 years, my husband decided he wanted to go to dental school. And I told him, well, you're not getting any younger, so let's do it. So while he was in dental school, I decided to finish my bachelor's degree in finance. And so he graduated when he was 40. And we decided, instead of him going to work for somebody else, that because he was 40 and we had 3 children, that we were just going to go ahead and open our own practice. And so we opened a practice from the ground up, including building a building. And so you can see in the top left picture of this slide, my little guy is helping us break ground. He is now a senior in high school and due to graduate next year. And so it was just fun. It was fun at that time. But my husband was a brand new dentist, and he said, Vicki, the only way we can do this is if I learn how to be a dentist and you do everything else. And so that's what we did. I did everything except the dentistry. I did the HR, the IT, the bookkeeping, all of it, and just figured it out and made mistakes as we went along. And it was a great experience. If anybody's ever worked with their spouse, you'll know some of the challenges that you have when you're working with a spouse or a partner. And during that time, about 2019, I decided I wanted to improve my managerial skills and better understand myself. And so I became a certified life coach through the life coach school. And I wanted to do something that was my own, because if you can imagine, even though I'm running the practice, everybody refers back to the dentist. And it doesn't matter, even though I was running the business, he was the boss. And so I just thought, you know what, I want to do something on my own. And I've always enjoyed money and numbers. And so I started becoming a cash flow management coach. And during 2020, it was, COVID. And for a lot of people, that was really bad news, but it happened to be our best year ever. And we got hit with a huge tax bill, and something that I wasn't aware of. I had no idea what I was doing. My bank always told me that I managed the money really well, but I didn't have enough money to pay this huge tax bill. So I knew there had to be a better way to manage our money. So I had started as a cash flow management coach, but I liked the way she was doing it, but then I found another one that used profit first methods. And I haven't looked back since. I really like the way that they do their cash flow management. So I love talking about money. I love talking about the power that it creates and the tools that it uses, but it is just a tool. It's not anything. And we were talking earlier about there's a lot of shame around money, and I want to normalize the conversation. So after 11 years of owning the dental practice, we had the opportunity to sell. We owned a practice in a really rural area of Kansas. And it took us 5 years to find an associate. And when he was willing and wanted to go ahead and sell, we decided to move on. And so you can see this is actually our complete journey. We went from my small children breaking ground to, on the bottom left photo is, you can see I've been crying. It was our last shot together at the dental office as we were leaving it for the last time, into the middle picture where I was so excited to sell at the title company. And ever since then, I've just been coaching as a cash flow management coach, and my husband has been doing different jobs. And our exciting news is that we are getting ready to move to Saipan in the next month and a half or so. And so life goes on, and I'm living that adventure that I want. So let's go ahead and jump in to a little bit more about the presentation. Let me get the slide to change. There we go. So whenever we're talking about money, it is so important to find your why, because money does seem to be an uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people. And when you find your why, like, why are you here? Why are you wanting to talk about money or to learn these financial tools to understand your financial independence? It helps you stay focused, and it helps you stay driven. I've heard the statistic that finances are 99% emotional and 1% math. And so I tried to see if that was actually true or if someone just made that up. And the only thing I could find was that Capital One did a study in 2018, and it said that 78% of Americans reported experiencing financial stress, with 40% saying that money is their biggest source of stress. Financial stress can lead to emotional responses such as anxiety, depression, and even physical symptoms, such as the inability to sleep or headaches, which actually affects your ability to make sound financial decisions. So it's really important to just take a moment and figure out, why are you here and what is it that you want to learn? And understand that it is going to be uncomfortable. That's just the way we've been brought up, and we want to normalize the conversation around money. But understand, if you're having uncomfortable feelings, it's completely normal. So next, we're going to talk about the financial metrics. And I'm going to approach this like I approach anything as a life coach, especially when we're making goals. I want to start with the really big picture. Start with the results that you desire, which is your financial independence number. And then we're going to break it down into actionable steps, which the first one is the net worth statement. And then we're going to break it down even further to figure out how you can build your net worth with your money allocations, both your personal and your business. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the financial independence number. And what that is the amount of money that you need to have invested or saved in order to generate enough passive income to cover your living expenses for the rest of your life. And so you need to have a couple of numbers, and a lot of these you might just have to estimate. You have to know what your future annual expenses are expected to be, and you'll have to come up with a rate of return. Now, the thing about these calculators is it's actually really nice to be able to play around with it a little bit. What if you have a higher rate of return? And what if you have, lower annual expenses? All of those things will go into and affect your financial independence number. What's really interesting is this rate of return is your actual entire portfolio rate of return. And when I was talking to AdaPia about this, I said, I have an issue with this rate of return, because in my head, I was thinking stock market, and it's not. There is so much more that goes into your whole entire portfolio that you need to have an actual rate of return for your entire portfolio. And I would say, I would even want to break that down into actual cash flow numbers. As a cash flow coach, I really focus on, we can guess and estimate, but what are the actual numbers that are coming in? And then you can come up with your financial independence number. Now, the tools that I use for this, it could be something as simple as this simple calculator that I have in the spreadsheet. Those are the two inputs that you put in, is the future annual expenses and the rate of return. But there are online calculators that you can put in a lot of different inputs, and all you have to do is Google financial independence number calculator, and there are a whole bunch of calculators that will come up. And so it's good to start out with a number, like just get an idea, a generalized number, and then we're going to break it down to see how we're going to get to that number. Okay, so next we're going to talk about our net worth, or our personal financial statement. And this is what makes up that financial independence number. And it is typically your assets minus your liabilities. But I don't want you to stop there, because I want you to include how those assets are diversified. Now, assets are things that make you money. Things like cash and real estate and public equity, or things in the stock market, private equity like syndications, and treasuries and fixed income. Then you have to deduct the liabilities. What is the cost of that real estate? So your mortgage, what's your credit card debt, your student loans, and things that you might not think of, like overdue bills or outstanding lines of credit. But the other really important thing is, how is that allocated? How is it diversified? Diversification limits the impact of one asset class underperforming while potentially increasing overall returns. And so you have to make sure your assets are distributed over all of those different asset categories, or many of them, just to lower one asset, the risk of one asset class over the others. So what's also important is, let me get to the next slide. Things are just as important as what's included as what's not included in this net worth statement. Now, if you were to ask your CPA to create a net worth statement for you, or if you're filling out a loan for the bank, they're going to include things like your primary residence and vehicles and personal items. But for our net worth statement, we don't want to include those, because they don't represent economic resources that can be read to generate income. And so for us, make sure my internet's a little crazy on me, so just let me know if I freeze. We want to just make sure that we are including the things that are generating cash, or that we can use to generate cash. Okay, so just a warning, I am going to show some spreadsheets. And so if you are allergic to spreadsheets, go ahead and get, your Benadryl and your inhaler, because I do use spreadsheets in a lot of this. Hopefully it won't be too bad. Okay, so this is an example. This is not my personal net worth statement, but it is what I base my net worth statement off. And you can see that I include the different asset classes, because we want to know how those assets are broken down. And so each one of these represents a different tab as to where I'm tracking all of the assets. And along with that, you have to include the liabilities. And so again, it's assets minus the liabilities. And it's so interesting. When I was preparing for this, I was talking to some friends and to some of my family, and I asked them if they had a personal net worth statement. And one person in particular said, well, yeah, I do. And I said, okay, well, how do you track it? What's the tool that you use? And she said, Quicken. And I said, well, okay, I know her well enough to know that she has real estate and she has stocks. And I said, so do you put the real estate and the stocks in Quicken? And she's like, well, actually, no. And she's like, I probably should put everything in one spot, shouldn't I? And I'm like, yeah, you really should, because I think so often we don't have it quantified. It's so important to quantify and put it in one spot, exactly what you have and what asset class it's in, so you can really see how to manage it. And just like Peter Drucker said, what gets measured gets managed. So we want to make sure that we are managing it. So the next part of the net worth statement is the diversification. Now, we can look back at those numbers, and that's what I had done for a long time, is I just had that spreadsheet. But when I was preparing for this, I had listened to some of the old roundtables that AdaPia had done, and she was talking about making sure that it was diversified. And she showed a graph of how the 1% have their portfolios diversified. And I'm a very visual learner. And so I added this pie chart to say, okay, this is how it's actually diversified, because the numbers mean, I'm like, okay, I know I have a lot of this, but I don't have a lot of this. The pie chart makes it so clear. And so it's really important to look at how your portfolio is diversified. And the way I met AdaPia was through a real estate conference, because I knew that I was too heavy in cash and in the stock market, and I knew I needed to diversify, and I just wasn't sure how to do it or what I needed to do. But I knew that, according to my financial advisor, I was well diversified in the stock market, but my portfolio went down last year. And so my whole portfolio went down. And I thought, okay, this is not okay. This is not the way that I want it to be. And so I looked at my percentages. And when I asked myself, do I like that answer? No, I didn't. And so that's when I started investing in real estate. You want to make sure that as you're looking at your portfolio, that you're creating more stability, not less. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time changing my slides. There we go. Okay, so the tools that I like for net worth, and these, just know that you need to find a tool or a system that works for you. What works for you might not work for someone else. You might love spreadsheets like I do. You might hate spreadsheets. You might be allergic to spreadsheets. So these are some tools that I recommend going from least favorite to my most favorite. So YNAB is my least favorite in this situation. It's in my most favorite in some other later in the presentation. But some pros and cons about YNAB: it's easy to connect accounts, but it does have quite a bit of a learning curve. So if you're familiar with YNAB and you use it a lot, it might be exactly what you want. But if not, if you're kind of not used to learning a new software, you don't want to learn a new software, YNAB might not be the best answer for you. Empower, I like, because it can connect to your stock market accounts. But I actually had a hard time getting it to connect to my stock market accounts. Once I got it connected, it took help from the help desk, and I actually had to cancel and delete my account and use a whole different email, and then it connected right away. But it still is not connected to all of my stock market accounts. They're still having some glitches, so it's fine. But my favorite are spreadsheets, because you can customize it to fit your needs exactly. And there is more work up front, but in the long run, once you get it set up, for me, it's the way I like to track things. Okay, next we're going to talk about money allocations, both personal and business. And so when we're looking back at our net worth statement, all of those assets need a job. They have to have a job. You can't just think, oh, it's for long term, because we don't live just in the long term. So, for example, if you look at the liquid assets in that spreadsheet, how much of those are household funds? How much are you going to be using? How much are emergency funds? And then business assets and long-term assets. You need to create allocations for that net worth statement. And the way I like to say it is, you've got to stop tracking your money and start allocating your money. Do it with intention, rather than looking backward and seeing what you did. Look forward and see what you want your money to do. And so you have to look at both your business and your personal based on your current goals and your future goals. And you have to have a target and a plan for both. So with the personal allocations, these are the steps. Other people call it a budget. Some people hate the word budget, whatever you want to call it. But you start by writing everything down. That's the easiest way to do it. Write down all of your spending if you don't already have it. And then you're going to decide how you want to live now. So I love Dave Ramsey, but I have some issues with some of the things that he teaches, because if you want a latte every morning, I want you to put that in your budget. If you want a monthly massage or a quarterly massage, I want you to build that in rather than taking it out and feeling like you're suffering. Now, that's not to say there's not some things that you need to pause for a while to attain a long-term goal, but just make sure that you decide how you want to live now, and that will help you also learn how to live you want to live in the future. So there might be some give and take. You might sacrifice a little bit now so that you can have the life that you want to live in the future. And back to writing down your current spending, make sure that you are including things like the semi-annual bills and the yearly bills. Those are the things that we call budget busters. That a lot of times, if you forget those things, they will break your budget. And so then we're going to break those up into monthly spending allowances. And then you need to make the necessary adjustments. I like to have 3 income targets, or 3 budgets, let's say, that you mark them as the things that are essential, things that are optional, and things that are long-term. And just play around with those numbers, because a lot of people just like to bury their head in the sand and just like, oh, I'll just make it up. And, and I call it the magic shell game. It's like, okay, where am I going to pull this money from? And I have to take it from here and leave it from there. And that causes so much stress. We have so much stress in our lives anyway, that let's be intentional. Like, don't pretend like you're not going to have to replace those tires, because you're going to have to replace those tires. And so if you plan ahead for it, then it's not a surprise and it's not such a stressful event in your life. And then the final thing with the personal allocations is start, stop, and keep. So what do you want to start doing with your budget? What do you want to stop doing? And what do you need to keep doing? And so then as you're moving forward, then you're going to do the same thing with your business allocations. And as business owners, we also need to have a budget and a revenue target. So the same steps with your business as with your personal. How do you want to run your business now? How do you want to run your business in the future? And then make the necessary adjustments. If you know you're going to need a new computer, then put that in your budget. Rather than saying, oh, where am I going to come up with a couple $1,000s? You put aside $20 a month, or it'll be $200 a month, but just plan ahead and don't pretend like it's not going to happen. If you want to have that business coach, then build it into your budget and then see what it is that you need to do with your income to be able to meet those allocations. So next, we're going to talk about the income target, the revenue target. And hopefully everyone as a business owner has a revenue target. And how did you come up with that number? So when I was running the dental office, I had a revenue target, but I honestly just kind of made it up. I didn't have a formula. I love myself a good formula, because I just feel like, okay, if I do this, then it's going to work. And I had taken, like I knew basically what my payroll expenses would be and my overhead would be, and then I went above that, but I didn't have an actual formula. So what Profit First does is it gives you a formula. So most of the time when you look at profit is defined as revenue minus expenses. And with Profit First, it flips that formula on its head. It does revenue minus an intentional profit equals how much you have left over for expenses. And it's a beautiful thing. It's like, okay, I actually have numbers that I should be using. And then we can create this revenue target. So if you so the percentages that you have here, the book Profit First actually does give you percentages, but they don't really apply to most of the people that I work with, because for the book, it's for commercial businesses who have been in business for 5 to 10 years. They have a building, they have financial statements going back a decade, and so they could see what their averages are and make adjustments. With most of the businesses that I work with, They're online business owners or dentists. And we do have those numbers where we create our own numbers like you see. So we start like at the bottom, the operating expenses. You can go back and you can see how much your operating expenses are on a monthly basis or have an estimate, and you put that number in there. And then your owner's pay. Owner's pay is how much you want to take out of the business to put into your personal allocations, into your personal budget. If you are a partner or have a spouse, it's how much you are contributing to your family budget. And then the taxes, that is the top line revenue. That's not an effective tax rate. And that is something that you need to get from your CPA. And finally, you want to put an intentional profit in there. You want to start out, usually you're going to put anywhere from 1% to 5%. You don't want to decrease that number after you've put in a number. So if you're not sure if you can afford 5% intentional profit, you're going to put it at 1% and then only go up. And so like in the example number 1, you can see there's an intentional profit of 5%, taxes 20% from your CPA, your owner's pay, say you want to take out $5,000 a month, and then your operating expenses are $3,000 a month. And then if you do that, that gives you the monthly revenue target of $10,666.67. And again, you're going to have 3 different budgets of these different revenue targets. You're going to do one for the essential, your optional, and your long-term. And so just to play around with these numbers for a little bit, if we change the taxes to 15% instead of 20%, your revenue target goes to $10,000. And then finally, if you change the owner's pay to $8,000, which is $3,000 more than the original example, you can't just increase your revenue by $3,000 to take $3,000 more out. You actually have to increase it by $4,000 because you need to also increase your profit and your taxes from your CPA. And so what do we do after this? So the first thing we're going to do is get our revenue target, and then we see what the percentages are. And so as new revenue comes into the business, you allocate it according to those calculated percentages. So in our example number 3, intentional profit is 5%, taxes is 20%, owner's pay is 54.55%, and operating expenses is 20.45%. Then as all of the money comes in, you're going to allocate each one of them into these percentages. So again, you're looking forward, you're not spending the money before you have it, you're doing it with purpose and intention. Okay, so for my favorite tools for personal allocations, Empower is great, and so is Mint, and Quicken too. I didn't add Quicken to there, but I would say that these are tracking tools. They track what you're doing, and they even help you budget before you have the money. And so that's why they're my least favorite. Spreadsheets are always going to be one of my favorite ways to use it. And then my favorite for personal allocations is YNAB, because you're not spending that money until it hits your bank account. And then when it hits your bank account, you're allocating them into the different categories that they belong in. And you can look at the YNAB app when you're at the grocery store and say, okay, I have $100 worth of groceries and I have $150 in my envelope for groceries, so I'm good to go. And then if I'm shopping and I'm like, oh, I really want shoes, I can take a look at my app and say, okay, I don't have any money for shoes right now. Do I want shoes more than I want groceries? Do I want shoes more than I want gas for my car? I have to decide ahead of time where I'm taking that money from. And then I can say, oh no, I'm going to probably skip the shoes this time. So then for the business allocations, now for a long time, I have been using YNAB for my business allocations. And it is a really good tool, especially if you are familiar with it and you really like the fine details. If you're new to YNAB and you're not really sure how to do it, there are better options. I love the revenue target calculator. in the spreadsheet. You can also find this by Googling Profit First Revenue Calculator. And it's online, it's free. You can totally do it just that way. My favorite, brand new within the last couple of months, and they are banks with Profit First built in. And so as money comes into the account, you have preset the Profit First category percentages, and it automatically splits it up for you. Like, it's mind-blowing. And I personally am using Novo and absolutely loving it. Relay is actually the official Profit First bank. And so these are brand new to to me for sure, but to the area. I think Relay announced last month that they were the official Profit First bank. And so this is becoming a real thing on how to manage your money. And I love it. I love that the world is helping us manage our money in an effective way. Okay, so all things are created twice, first in your mind and then in reality. And our dreams are our most precious personal wealth. So dream big, but also know that you can create it. The best way to get a hold of me is through Vicki Holman Coaching at Gmail. I'm also on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. So I'm going to go back to you, AdaPia.
Thank you, Vicki. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm sure that we're going to get a lot of questions. So I will just let everybody know, just pop your questions into the Q&A or the chat. We'll watch them both. I really appreciate the way that you laid all of that out, Vicki, and also the way that you laid it out for personal and for business. I often think of it in the reverse, that those of us who are in business will tend to know about our business budget, and we have all the cash flow stuff. We have it in business, and we don't do its mirror or its parallel in our personal lives. And yet so many of the tools and the techniques that we use in business can be applied to our personal lives as well, and really help us feel more stable there. So I really appreciate seeing that. We were having a conversation yesterday in my leadership board with Linda about, I say I'm the CFO of my family. And so I run our household finances like a CFO, like I would in business with different metrics. And so what you showed us is so important. And I love the spreadsheets. I love spreadsheets. I think that I got over how much I didn't like them. And then I found a lot of power in them. I found a lot of power in quantifying these things and looking at them and understanding what to do with them. We do have a question actually about software here from Larry. And he says, first of all, he said, love your presentation, such a smart approach to finance, and thanks so much. If you had to pick one software to track, manage if just one, what software package would you recommend as the best to start with?
I would say YNAB.
Okay.
If you're willing to put the time and effort into learning the software, there is a big learning curve with it.
Yeah.
I've been using YNAB for over 16 years and coaching on it for almost 3. And so it is definitely got a lot of the function. But you also need to go in knowing the limitations. Like you really can't track your stocks in there and your real estate. I mean, you can put them in as assets, but that's not the purpose of it. The purpose of YNAB is the cash envelope system. So it takes Dave Ramsey's system of envelopes and puts it into a digital software. And so with Profit First in your business, it's doing the same thing. You're allocating your money. You're having an envelope for each of the spending items, and you're looking at that before you spend. And so it really is, I would say overall, that would probably be the best place to start.
Right. And that works for both business and personal YNAB.
It does. Yep,
okay.
It does. And you can get, with a YNAB subscription, you have unlimited budgets per subscription. So you can have a business budget and a personal budget in the same subscription. So you don't have to have different subscriptions.
Got it. Linda?
So I have a question for you, Vicki. First, I want to acknowledge the incredible depth and breadth of learning that you provided, such detail, such incredible, actionable insight. Everything that you provided to us, we could take action on this afternoon. And I want to say that that is one of the hallmarks in my mind of extraordinary presentation for the members of Leadership Global is not only are you providing vision, but you are also providing tools and actions that people can take right now to be able to manage their finances, manage their wealth, create their unique personal sort of vision of what they want to create in a really, I think, applicable way. So thank you. Now, if someone has 2 or 3 businesses, I know we've got a lot of ambitious leaders in Leadership Global, and oftentimes they may have 2 or 3 different pursuits. They may be an active investor. They may have 2 businesses that they're involved in. They may be an advisor for a business that they've invested in. So if you have multiple pursuits or multiple businesses that you're managing, how would you recommend that we think about bookkeeping and sort of being sure that we're on top of the P&L of those businesses? Is there a particular software that can really help manage multiple businesses in terms of bookkeeping and accounting and just sort of P&L management?
That's a really good question. I would say, first of all, make sure that you are absolutely separating all of the businesses into their own individual. And then that's where spreadsheets come in for me, because you could ask for, I know some people ask for a cash flow report, depending on how big the business is, daily or weekly, and seeing where your cash is, because we all know that cash flow is king. And then you could connect those spreadsheets and make them, aggregate it into one. And that's what I love about spreadsheets. I don't know of a software that would combine those. Maybe that's what we need to build.
Agreed. I would invest in that. But thank you so much, Vicki. That's really helpful.
Yeah, that's a great question, Linda. And actually, Tracy was on, I saw as an attendee, and then she left. But Tracy McWilliams built a software for middle market in investment firms or family offices, but also for private investors, where you can actually track things like your private equity. Maybe you're an advisor and you have safe, equity in safe, or you have Class B shares and something else. And so tracking also the way something moves from seed round all the way up to like an A round to an IPO, et cetera. So she's actually built that. And
that's awesome.
And it's like, that's the kind of tool that is maybe more for private investments, which can't be so easily tracked. But that space is really important. Like, you're talking about like a portfolio career and like, how do you fit all that? I do all of mine in Excel, and it's not as smooth as her software or as this kind of software. A lot of people are moving into that role of like having some shares over here and having some things over here. So it's a really good question. And it's a really important software that we're going to need, because Vicki, you were saying on that slide, it was the Peter Drucker, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So if we don't know what we have, and we don't know how it's moving along also, as it grows in value, or when is a good time to divest of it, for example, would be another question, maybe more of a CPA question as you're coming along. But I actually had a couple of questions about percentages. So one of them is, what is a suggested, in your experience, what's a suggested amount for savings? Like in my budgeting and buckets sheet, I have it at an ideal target of saving 20%. I like to, if possible, go all the way up to 50 if I can in certain instances. But in your opinion, what's a good number that's a manageable, attainable number?
So again, it's personal for everyone. And I think that's why we want to start with that financial independence number. We want to know where you want to get to, and then we can break that down. Like, what are you going to need to get to that number? Just to answer your question, if you're brand new to saving, I would say start at 10%, and then build it up. And, ideally for me, ideally for me would be 20 to 25%,
Mhm.
as long as by doing that, I'm going to hit that financial independence number. And that's why knowing that number is so important, and looking at, the ability and the, compounded returns and all of that stuff. But, as a general rule, start at 10% and then just go up and really have an eye on that target. That my favorite saying is, if you can't hit a target that you cannot see.
Yeah.
And so you have to have a target, and then you come up with the ways to hit that target.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, it's a moving target, and that's okay. I feel like sometimes it's easy to get caught in this idea of, well, I said it has to be 25%. And then, I'm totally speaking from my own experience. Like, I hold myself to it so much that it's like painful or uncomfortable or just like not even practical, which is a whole problem, right? Where it's like, how much compassion and like, how much can I cut myself a break if something comes up? But like, I just want to put that out there because like, you're it's going to be unpleasant when you're like, I really said I'm going to hit that goal. And then you don't. So as a coach, like how often do you come across that, and how do you deal with it?
Okay. So this is how I deal with it. So if you're playing darts, where is the highest point?
It's right in the middle.
Nope. It is not in the middle. It's on an outer ring. And so just realize that if you're on the board, you're doing okay. But it isn't, most common misconception, the highest points is not in the middle. If you can hit the board, then you're doing pretty good. So give yourself some compassion. You want to still be able to live your life.
Yeah.
But just know you're on the board. And sometimes that's good enough.
Yeah.
We also have one more question by an anonymous attendee who said, thanks for your wonderful presentation. In regards to determining your financial independence number, do you consider your pre or post-tax annual spending amount? And how does inflation factor into this?
Yeah, so that's where you can get into those really complicated calculators online. And I would say it's post-tax. Like, what is it that you need to actually be taking out? And then as you're looking at those returns, you're taking all of that into consideration. You're taking your tax rate and the inflation, knowing how many dollars that you want to be taking out of your portfolio. AdaPia, would you agree with that?
Yeah. And you can add the inflation, you can play with inflation and tax too in that spreadsheet. It can be shocking, the pre and post tax. And especially if you're trying to plan for very far in the future, it's not that sustainable because we don't know. We also don't know like what we'll be spending, what a dollar will be worth, in 20 years from now, what our tax rate is going to be. So there, you can add those numbers in there to the spreadsheet as well to play around with it. And I think more than anything, it gives a sense of the range that you want to be working with, and maybe more general target. At least for me, I need a little more flexibility in the way that I approach things. So that's how I've built mine out. Yeah. So that was Larry who mentioned, he apologized for inserting it as anonymous attendee, but that was Larry. Thank you. Thank you, Larry. And I also wanted to bring up, I didn't know about Novo and Relay. I have Ally, that's a digital bank, and they have buckets for savings, like in the savings. So it's kind of like the profit first, but you can actually pre-allocate percentages out of your savings account into certain categories that I found really helpful, so that I don't have to manually go in there and do it. And so that's the Ally digital bank. And so it's the only one that I don't have like a million banks, but I really appreciated that approach where in the savings account, it like auto allocates based on percentage and time and things like that. So I don't know if you use Ally or know about it, but I wanted to offer that up.
I love that. Thanks. No, I've heard of it, but I didn't realize that they did the buckets. That's amazing.
Yeah. So for everyone too, those are really fun. And then I've also noticed real quick, and Julian, I'm going to get to your comment or question here. I bank with First Republic. Yes, they're still around and they're okay. And they have the ability to connect some of my other bank accounts, just bank accounts, so that I can kind of have a snapshot, kind of like what Empower, which was Personal Capital, used to be able to do. So certain banks might allow you to do that too. So you can see at a minimum your bank balances in your other banks, which I find can be really helpful, and it auto updates because it's got that API connection. So maybe some other banks do that. Do that as well. So Juliana says, I love the clarity of your presentation, Vicki. Gave me lots of ideas to reorganize my financial planning. The profit approach and tax considerations are great insights. So thank you for that. And Victoria, you're asking about online digital banks. Are they safe? Yeah, they all have high yield savings accounts. Those were not even the banks that had a problem, because I would say they weren't lending as much, because banks are really lenders. Let's be honest. They're not a bank, they're lenders. And in fact, when you read the financial news now, they're actually referred to as lenders a lot, because that was the problem, is as they were also like over leveraged. And then they put their money in something that lost value. There's rankings. A lot of reports came out back in, was that February, March, when that was all happening, where they were ranking, because it's public knowledge what banks have reserves to a certain degree. So you can actually see, you could probably Google it to try to find it, because under consumer protection, we're allowed to know if we're safe, if our money is safe. And yeah, so there, you can do some research on that. You can find it. And I would also say one of the big things and about the way we plan around our money is don't keep more than $250,000 in any one bank or bank account. And that was just, let's say like a basic mistake, or that a lot of businesses made, that they had even hundreds of millions of dollars in one bank account in one bank. So the FDIC limit is 250, and that you can have lots of different banks or bank accounts to spread that risk if that's a concern. Now the government stepped in and backstopped everything. So in a way, everything is backstopped. Will that be forever? I don't know. So diversification, right? Vicki, you're talking about also diversify your bank accounts. And the high yield savings accounts are a function of a regular bank. The bigger banks don't do that. They could, but they don't. They're not riskier just because they're high yield in a digital bank. It's that your Wells Fargo and company, they're just not giving you the difference, but they should. They're keeping it. Whereas the digital banks are competing and they're giving you more of the interest that they're getting from the central bank. So just be aware of that. Yeah. So that's another piece of it. I don't know, Vicki, how many bank accounts do you have?
I have several.
Yeah,
I do. I have one major household bank, but then I have multiple high yield savings accounts.
Yeah, exactly. Do you put your money in money market accounts too, or do you keep them in high yield savings?
Both.
Yeah. Okay. And from a perspective, just from, the financial tools and the planning, et cetera, what kind of liquidity do you recommend in terms of, obviously bank accounts are immediate liquidity. Do you recommend for short-term liquidity, like 30-day T-bills, like 90-day, like how do you think about that in terms of, because now these days, right, we're in a higher yield, higher interest rate environment. So now we can actually talk about this. Before last year, we couldn't talk about, like we were talking about 0.1% or 0.10% in bank accounts. So now that we can talk about this, like from the tools and budgeting perspective, and even a cash flow perspective, what is a good amount of cash to have on hand versus that might come due 30, 60, 90 days, 6 months?
So I recommend 3 to 6 months of living expenses in cash and in, your high yield savings accounts. But everybody is different. And, some people think that that's too much. Some people think that's not enough. And so it really depends on your comfort level, and then you can start, if you're still looking to keep some of it liquid, so maybe it's 3 months in cash and 3 months in T-bills, but it's totally personalized to you. What are your thoughts? What have you done with that?
Right now I am rebuilding my my cash reserves because we purchased some land to build a house. So I'm currently like rebuilding my cash reserves. I have a line of credit as like super backup. But I like to ladder it too. Like I like to have a certain amount rolling back in because I know I don't need like all of it right now. So I try to ladder it to take advantage of higher yields. And so like the old strategy of bond laddering, I actually do that with my shorter term things as well. And sometimes like some of the higher yield savings accounts are so good that I just leave a bunch of it there because I don't have to ladder it. Like it's not worth that much more of the duration risk in terms it's not the risk of losing it. It's just that what if I really need it? And sometimes like that delta is so small, it's not worth it. I'm just going to leave it in the high savings account. I would say, especially for businesses, like I like to have a lot of money in the bank. I know it's not doing anything, but when I need it, or if I need it, it's that cushion that is worth not making an extra like quarter point on cash.
Well, and that's exactly what I would argue with you, that it is doing something for you. It's giving you peace of mind.
Yes.
So,
right. Yeah. Good point. That's exactly right. You just nailed it. Yeah. That's just it. It's like, it is giving us something. It's just not giving us a financial return. And maybe, and we can wrap up here, Linda. I know that, that we're hitting time, is that it's not just the financial return that we get from our money. And so I think that's a really great place to wrap up. And thank you so much, Vicki. This was such a great presentation and discussion.
Sounds great.